The portion of Chayei has 105 passages, and the Siman, the mnemonic, is the word Yehayada. Who is Yehayada, and how does this connect to the portion of Chayei? Furthermore, in the portion of Chayei we talk about the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, and the Torah repeats the story not only once but twice in great length of how Rivka was chosen, and Eliezer tells the story over again, and finally Yitzchak and Rivka marry. But yet the Torah talks about all the details and repeats it over again. Comes the question to mind, why such a lengthy story about such a simple daily occurrence which we call marriage? Who is Yehayada? As we explained many times, that the rabbis, when they search for a mnemonic, they look for a word that was connected to the Parsha. And this word is generally a name of a person, and this name of the person underscores an idea that perhaps we overlooked in the Parsha. Who is Yehayada? If you read the Haftorah on the portion of Chayei, it starts off how King David was on his deathbed, and his son Adoniyahu rebelled and proclaimed himself as the new king. Says the Torah that there were three people who stood on David's side, and they were, number one, Nasan HaNavi, Nathan the prophet, and the famous Kohen at that time, and a third person that the Haftorah tells us was called Benayahu ben Yehayada. So you had Tzaddik HaKohen, you had Nasan HaNavi, and the third person was Benayahu ben Yehayada, the son of Yehayada, which is the mnemonic of this week's Parsha. Who is this fellow, Benayahu ben Yehayada? Well, if you look back into the book of Samuel 2, chapter 23, the prophet tells us that this fellow, Benayahu ben Yehayada, was one of the most mightiest men in the army of King David. He was one of the three mighty men. And he slew a lion on a snowy day in the middle of a well. And he was a man of many achievements. But most importantly, it concludes by saying that he was King David's confidant. That's who he was. Furthermore, it says that he was the person in charge of the archers and the slingers in the army of King David. And the tractate in the Gemara Brachos tells us that, what does it mean, the archers and the slingers? Says the Talmud that actually it alludes to the Urim V'Tumim. The Urim V'Tumim was the breastplate that the Kohen wore, and in that breastplate was the name of God. And whenever there was a question, if the king should go to war or not go to war, he would go and stand before the high priest, ask the question, and because of the Urim V'Tumim, this holy name of God, the letters on the breastplate would light up and answer the question, yes or no. Tosfos in the tractate of Brachos says that, what does it mean, the archers and the slingers? It actually means the men of the great Sanhedrin, the men of the great court. And they are the people that shekorsin divreihem, they were able to exact their words. And furthermore, shemufloyim b'maseim, they were wondrous in their actions. From all of this information, we gather that this person, Benayahu ben Yehayada, was actually a very, very phenomenal individual, physically mighty. King David used him to be his confidant, and he possessed spiritual powers like the Urim and Tumim to be able to see the future. Actually, if you look into Kabbalah, there's a lot on this person, Benayahu ben Yehayada. that he had the ability to be miyachid yechudim, which means he had the ability to unify unions of God's holy and ineffable name, not only in the higher worlds but also in the lower worlds. And as the Kabbalah says, that he was able to accomplish what most tzaddikim, holy righteous people, are able to accomplish after their demise, he was able to accomplish while he was still alive. This is who this fellow Binyahu ben Yehoyada was. And furthermore, Kabbalah says that in the name of Binyahu ben Yehoyada, we find basically the three letters of God's name, Yud and Hey and Vav. And both of these names, Binyahu, the son of Yehoyada, both mean the same thing, and that is the son of the three letters of God's name, and the one who knew the three letters of God's name, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav. So why is Yehoyada, the mnemonic, chosen in this week's Parsha? It's true that we talk about him in the Torah. It's true that he was the confidant of King David, but what is the parallel to the Parsha? And what is the message that it is trying to convey? If you look further into the Kabbalah, we find something amazing. And that is, Binyahu ben Yehoyada was actually a reincarnation of Eliezer, the servant of Abraham. And just like Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, was Avraham Avinu's most trusted servant, so too, in the generation of King David, it was Binyahu ben Yehoyada that was his confidant. In other words, the mnemonic of this week's Torah portion is telling us to focus not so much on the passing of Avraham Avinu or the passing of Sarah, but rather our main focus in this week's Parsha, based on the mnemonic, should be on the confidant of Avraham Avinu, which was Eliezer. What was the story with Eliezer in this week's Torah portion? Avram Avinu gets old in his days, and he realizes that it's time to marry off Yitzchak. And this, by the way, is the responsibility of every father, to marry off their child. And that's why the parents pay for the wedding. And you find there are many letters of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe stresses that being that the parent has the obligation to marry off the child, God will surely give the parent the money and the tools that they need to be able to marry off the child. So because Avraham Avinu gets old, what does he do? He gets Eliezer to go and to find a wife for Yitzchak. And so Eliezer is the first shlichus. He is the first emissary, the first messenger in the Torah. What do we find about Eliezer? Number one, he was called Demascas Eliezer of Damascus. Why was he called Eliezer of Damascus? Because he was a person that poured out the teachings of his master to others. And this Eliezer, the Torah says, tells us, Avraham Avinu sent him to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. And he gives him everything into his hands. What does everything mean? So there are two interpretations. One is the power of attorney. Avraham Avinu gave Eliezer the power of attorney to do anything he wanted with his property, with his fortune, and with his power. He also gave him the right to choose a wife for Yitzchak. And number two is, what does it mean that v'chol tuv adonav biyado, he gave him everything into his hand? That he actually gave Eliezer a contract, a shtar matana, a gift, that stated in the gift that everything he has is giving over to Isaac, everything he has is given over to his son Yitzchak. And the question is, why did he do that? So we understand that he wanted to impress the girl. Look, you're going to marry a rich boy. Yitzchak has so much money, he has all the wealth of Avraham, and Avraham Avinu was very, very wealthy. And therefore, by marrying him, you're going to become a wealthy woman. And therefore, perhaps you have to leave your father's home, and perhaps you never saw how Yitzchak looks. But look, he's a very, very wealthy person. But the commentaries ask, if you want to show that Yitzchak is wealthy, first of all, you can say Yitzchak is the son of Avraham. Avraham is the wealthiest man, and he's the son. And furthermore, if Avraham wanted to give everything to Yitzchak now, he could have given him half of his wealth, 3/4 of his wealth. But why everything that he had, he gave to Yitzchak? And the Rebbe explains that really what's happening here is not only the marriage of one individual, Yitzchak to Rivka, but rather the entire future of the Jewish people. Yitzchak and Rivka, Yitzchak was the first Jewish boy to be born, and Rivka was going to be his wife. And Avraham Avinu had to inculcate into this marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka the ability for all future generations, that every Jewish boy should marry a nice Jewish girl, and to be able to continue to have children and grandchildren who grow up in the way of Torah and mitzvos and follow in the ways of God. So therefore Avraham Avinu gave everything that he had to Eliezer. In other words, sometimes we say, I did my best. But you know something, your best just ain't good enough. You have to give it your all. And that is what Avraham Avinu did. He gave it his all. He gave everything that he had to Eliezer for Yitzchak to be able to begin this holy matrimony of Yitzchak to Rivka, and the beginning of the Jewish people and the progeny and the dynasty for all generations to come. This concept is explained further in Chassidus. And that is that Eliezer was the one that made the shidduch. Why Eliezer? Now, Avraham Avinu was old, but why couldn't he go down himself? Why did he need to make Eliezer the shaliach, the emissary, to perform this marriage? And furthermore, if Avraham Avinu was already frail, he could have said, Eliezer, bring me back a few girls. I will choose. I'll make the decision. Yitzchak will make the decision. Why does he make Eliezer the one to be the final verdict? To be the one to make the connection between Yitzchak and Rivka? So the Rebbe explains that the Alter Rebbe tells us that this marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka represents the ultimate union between God and the Jewish people. Yitzchak, according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, is called Ma, Shem Ma, and Rivka is called Shem Ban, the name of Ban. One is masculine and one is feminine. And the objective of creation is to unite the masculine together with the feminine. The masculine being God and the feminine being the Jewish people. The masculine being spirituality and the feminine being the physical. That the objective of every Jew is to unite heaven and earth. And this is done through the original marriage of Yitzchak to Rivka. And furthermore, this really took place and really came into effect after Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, when God came down to the mountain, and Moses, representing the Jews, went up to God, and there was a fusion between heaven and earth. That was the ultimate unity of Ma and Ban, these two holy names of God. However, for this to happen, it doesn't happen through Avraham Avinu. It doesn't happen only through the Moses of every generation, only through the Abraham of every generation. What the Torah is telling us is that each one of us is a shaliach. Each one of us is an emissary of God. It doesn't happen through Avraham, it happens through Eliezer, his servant. And what is the first thing Eliezer says? Eved Avraham Anochi. Before he began to say anything, he says, you should know I am the servant of Avraham. And each one of us has to know that we are Eved Avraham Anochi. We are the servant of Avraham. We are coming to do God's work. We are a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Almighty God. And our job every day when we wake up is to unite together Ma and Ban, these two levels of God's name. And this is done by the performance of Torah, study of Torah, and studying Torah and doing mitzvos. That is the way we unite the physical and the spiritual. And the Torah is hinting to us that this is done through Eliezer, through the average person, each one of us. We have the mission and we have the responsibility, not of Avraham Avinu. Yes, there are many big tzaddikim, there are 36 tzaddikim in every generation. And there's no generation that doesn't have a leader like Moses, and that's all true. But it wasn't Avraham Avinu that made this unity. Avraham Avinu teaches us about this unity. He inspires us about this unity. But the one that brings about the ultimate connection between heaven and earth is who? Is each one of us. Eliezer Eved Avraham, the servant of Avraham. It's interesting to note that the word shaliach, which means emissary, plus the number 10 equals Mashiach. And that is because each one of us, if we do our shalichus, if we do our work as an emissary of God with all 10 powers of the soul, then we have the ability to reveal the Mashiach within ourselves, and we have the ability to reveal Mashiach in the world. So this is the message of the Parsha. The Parsha is telling us that it was Yehoiada, Benyahu ben Yehoiada, who was the confidant of King David, who brought about the salvation. As you read further after the Haftorah, when King David called in the high priest, and he called in the prophet, and he called in Benyahu ben Yehoiada, so it says over there that he said that the high priest and the prophet should go and anoint my son Solomon. And then Benyahu ben Yehoiada answers and he says, Amen, true. Kasher hoya Hashem im Adoni HaMelech kein yeh im Shloimeh. We find that in the statement of Benyahu ben Yehoiada, he mentions God. He says, yes, it's true. Just like God was with King David, so too God will be with King Solomon. And this concept of finding the name of God in the mouth of Benyahu ben Yehoiada and in the mouth of Eliezer, the servant of Avraham, is another proof how they were truly a reincarnation, one of the other. And therefore, just like Eliezer brought about the unification between Yitzchak and Rivka, so too Yehoiada was the one that continued the progeny and the dynasty of King David, and he brought it over to Shlomo HaMelech. Why does the Rambam tell us that Mashiach will come from King David, and therefore he's called Mashiach ben David, but furthermore is going to come about specifically through the lineage, through the line of Shlomo, not through another son like Adoniyahu or Avshalom of King David. Who is the one that made this happen? Who was the one that brought it about? It was Benyahu ben Yehoiada. And here too, each one of us follow in the footsteps of Eliezer, and we follow in the footsteps of Benyahu. In other words, we might say, who are we to bring about the unification between God and the Jewish people? Who are we to bring about the concept of Mashiach into the world? Yeah, Shlomo HaMelech can do it, King David can do it, Moshe Rabbeinu can do it, Avraham can do it. But we're simple people, we can't do it. Says the Torah, no. Who was the one that brought about the first marriage between Yitzchak and Rivka, which is the beginning of all other marriages, for all generations, between one Jew and another Jew? And who brought about this unification between heaven and earth? It wasn't Avraham Avinu, it was Eliezer, who was a servant of Avraham. And so too each one of us. If we are truly a servant of Avraham, if we're truly Eved Avraham Anochi, and we are dedicated to the Torah, and we are dedicated to the leaders of our generation, and we are dedicated to fulfill God's mission, then each one of us is given V'chol tuv adonav biyadai. We have all of the property and all of the properties and all of the wealth of Avraham in our hands. In other words, God gives us everything we need. not only a lot, or health, or potential, but everything. We have everything we need. And God gives us everything that He has to be able to go and truly conquer the world and make the world His dwelling place and bring about the ultimate marriage between God and the Jewish people with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.